like to spend some time today talking about breakthrough insight, one of the investment areas in SQL Server 2012. But before I get going, I'd like to spend a little time talking about what I mean by breakthrough insight. So we'll build a little working definition. If we go back 10 to 20 years, data that powered business was sitting inside silos underneath applications. And we went through a period where we started to move this data, transform it into different forms, maybe from an online system into a data warehouse. And to do that, we used sort of the mother of all copy and pastes: extract, transform, and load. So the data really was just the state behind and underneath applications at that point. In today's world, data and information is what powers breakthrough insight. And getting that into the hands of the people who need to make the right decisions is becoming more and more critical to many businesses. And to make that concrete, there was a story I heard from a commercial airline enterprise architect a year or two ago. And we were talking about online systems. And he stopped and he said, "Our business is really tough now. It's a commodity. It's really hard." He said, "We've come to believe that the only way we're really going to survive is to do a better job of rescheduling the fleet after the big storm, to do a better job of yield management, and to do a better job of fuel management than our competitors." And he stopped for a second, and then he said, "And that all requires us to do new things with data that we don't know how to do today." Those new things with less data is what we mean by breakthrough insight. So let's spend some time talking about that. So Microsoft's approach to business insight is different. And if we look at a lot of things that have happened in information technology, quite often there's a tension between centralization and decentralization, between empowerment and control. And we've tended to look at these things as an either-or situation. And in the absence of some sort of balance, a lot of times this pendulum swings back and forth from centralization, decentralization, empowerment and agility to control. 6 or 7 years ago, we took a look at this and said, why does it have to be an or? Let's take an approach where we said, how do we make this an and? Let's do control and agility. Let's do control and empowerment. And we took a look at the various sides and tried to figure out how we could do that. And if we want to give the information to the end user, give them the ability to search, give them the ability to get their hands into it such that they can derive the insights that they need. But of course, from the IT system side, we want to make sure that it is in control, that we know the quality of the data, that we know that the system is being managed properly, that the data is in compliance. So trying to balance that is the approach that we've taken for several releases. A good example of this is SharePoint, where you can basically set things up so people can create their own websites, maybe for their own meeting. It's self-serve. Or you can go back and start from the IT side and build a corporate portal where you have a content management system, strict workflow, version control, and both of these sides can be done with SharePoint itself. And we use SharePoint ourselves in our self-service BI approach. So we'll take some time, we'll take a look at that. If we look from the user side, what you want to be able to do is very easily bring data together and to be able to mash it up, look at it from different sides. And there's a technology that we introduced in SQL Server 2008 R2 known as PowerPivot. This uses in-memory compressed column store data technology to build spreadsheets and models that consist of hundreds of millions of rows in a familiar tool, Excel. But behind this spreadsheet is a model that we call a BI semantic model, or BISM. So within that, you can write complex expressions, analyze the data, and you can take the data from an exploratory notion. I'm pulling it together, I'm mashing it up, through to an explanatory point where you can build pivot charts and pivot tables and then be able to share that with others. So that's what we introduced in SQL Server 2008 R2. Now with SQL Server 2012, we continue to invest in PowerPivot, and with that now we introduce advances in KPIs, and advances in ranking, hierarchy support, so PowerPivot gets richer. But we've also added on another tool that we call Power View. So think of PowerPivot as being the way that you can get into the data, explore, produce an information cube that then you can navigate and use to explain. But then imagine being able to put that into an incredibly rich visualization tool where you can have dynamic visualizations that again enable exploration and explanation. So PowerPivot and Power View fit together quite naturally, both built on top of this BI semantic model. And Power View is an incredible way to project insights to end users that are still interactive, to allow people to work with them, to mold things, to see things happening visually over time, and then to be able to annotate and highlight things and perhaps take a screenshot and publish on to others. We have technologies and features that let us embed these directly into PowerPoint presentations, such that these stunning graphics can actually be a part of presentations that we do on behalf of the business. So these familiar tools are built on Excel and built on SharePoint. So another key part of this agility and the self-service aspect is the ability to collaborate effectively with others within my organization. And that's enabled through familiar tools of Excel and SharePoint. So if we take one step further, and we look at this from the IT perspective, we want to have both the agility and the control. So we start in terms of giving IT tools using the same BI technology. So we could refer to this as BI for IT. So there are management views and portals built into the IT experience that themselves are built with PowerPivot and with Power View. So we have IT dashboards. We're also enabling the ability to have IT pick up end user solutions and manage them, to oversee them, because they're not sitting out on people's desktops. They're published within SharePoint, and people can go over them. IT staff can see what's being used, which ones are becoming popular. And we can also just have things start in SharePoint and be able to publish data, publish solutions there. So a key part of this is to be able to start small and then be able to grow up into an IT-administered system. So you can almost think about that as, how do I create things, I can build them fast and make them last. So one of the things that is new in SQL Server 2012 is the ability to take something from PowerPivot and be able to upgrade it, sort of graduate it up into analysis services as a centralized IT-managed solution that may include things like fine-grained access control and other sorts of things, but that can start as a smaller solution, prove its worth there, and then quite naturally be transitioned into a managed solution without having to start and rewrite it over. So that's an incredible thing. And I'll go back to that point around this balance between its agility with control, agility and control. It's not an either or. So with that, looking at both sides of that, where does the data come from that powers these solutions? I started by talking about 10 to 20 years ago, the data that was in the business was behind applications inside databases, and we lifted it out of there. In today's world, this phrase big data has become sort of very popular. And it's not just about volume. Big data is about velocity. It's about how quickly can I incorporate new data that's coming in. It's about the variety of data. It's not all in relational form. And you'll see that we have the icon of Hadoop over there. We'll come back to that later on. But there are a variety of technologies that come into play in the big data space. And again, as you start to look into this, you come to realize that it's not an either or. It's not, is it Hadoop or a data warehouse? The real use cases and what we see from people using these technologies together, and I'll show some examples, are that they're quite complementary. One of the phrases I refer to is information production. So you may take a petabyte of clickstream log that just represents usage on a particular site, and then use that to classify customers into varying activity levels. Or you may take usage information from a number of servers in a cloud service and just use the raw usage information to classify your customers over time into those who've done a proof of concept, those who came in and were tire kickers, and those that have a growing business. With that classification, that form of information that you produced lends itself quite well to the types of analysis that I described in the self-service BI solutions in the previous slides. So this is a very interesting new space, and Microsoft is doing a lot in this. One of the interesting things to think about at Microsoft is that there are a small number of players who are working with hundreds of petabytes of data running online businesses. And we're doing that in Microsoft for Bing in our online services business. So we have hundreds of petabytes of data, adding petabytes each month. And we run over 20,000 big data jobs per day to run that business. So we have a lot of experience there. And many of those jobs produce information that flow into the rest of our data platform, flow into our self-service and managed BI solutions. So these things fit together quite naturally. So let's spend a little time talking about how we manage the data. Now that we've elevated it out of databases, it's no longer locked in there. How do we ensure that the data that's flowing across is of the right quality, that the master data, sort of the reference data, is accurate and that people can work with it? So we've done a lot of work in SQL Server 2012 in what has been known as the enterprise information management space. So integration services, SQL Server integration services, a lot of work in SQL Server 2012 on making it production ready. It is now its own server, much easier to manage, a number of usability enhancements. So SSIS just becomes more of a foundational element of this strategy. We have a new product in the line, data quality services. So how do you know that you have the right quality data in your solution? Now, if you think about data quality abstractly and data cleansing, really what you have is the knowledge or the context on how to clean data, and then the instance data itself. And so the real trick is bringing these things together. Most people have gone at that today by building one thing. So you'll have someone who knows a particular domain. They'll build you the context and the knowledge and the solution to cleanse it. And if you have multiple domains to cleanse, quite often you have multiple solutions as stovepipes. So we took a look at that and wanted to take a different approach. We built the machinery and the experience around having a data quality service. And then we worked with content providers, those who have the knowledge about cleansing data, to allow them to participate in that without having to write the machinery for different domains and expect customers to be able to understand those. So that's really interesting, bringing that knowledge and context together with your data that needs to be cleaned in a very interesting way. So I'm going to add one more thing. If you think about what we're doing, and of course everyone who's listening understands there's a lot happening with the cloud services, think about how a cloud service where we can take the knowledge or the context from a vendor who has that and make it very easy for you to find that in your on-premises solution to be able to cleanse data. So imagine you're even in one of these solutions that we described a few slides ago, in PowerPivot. Imagine the ability to say, is the data that I'm using, is it clean? And have different services be able to come back in and say, you know, you have 2,000 addresses in here and 63 of them could be cleansed by our service. Would you like to do that? So this ability in a hybrid solution to reach out and cleanse data is enabled by the fact that we've separated the context or knowledge from the machinery and experience to actually clean the data. The last thing is master data services. And we had a solution in master data services previously. We rewrote a lot of it for SQL Server 2012. So if you've taken a look at it previously, definitely take a look again, because we've really thought about the workflow. And one of the things that we've introduced is an Excel add-in that facilitates the notion of you have people who understand aspects of the master data, and then you have a steward who's responsible for the coherence across that. So with master data services in SQL 2012, you can actually take a perspective, a slice of the data, email a spreadsheet to someone to ask them to fix up the price list or make some changes, and then submit them back in a workflow where the data steward can ensure that they're accurate and then just blend them in, incorporate them in the rest of the master data. That Excel add-in feature has been something that has been dramatic for people trying to build these solutions. It's been very, very popular, so I encourage you to take a look at that. Now that we have clean data and accurate master data, we can use that in our analytics and data warehousing. So let's talk about what we've done there. We've done a tremendous amount with in-memory technologies and something we call X-velocity. These technologies, which originally shipped with PowerPivot, use column storage technology, advanced compression, and now that is in the data warehousing product as well. And we see tremendous speed ups on queries with that, not just 10x, but 100x and 1000x in some cases. So the X-velocity lets us take advantage of new systems that have up to terabytes of main memory. These systems now need to be mission critical. We looked 10, 15 years ago. The core relational database engine itself always needed to be mission critical. We spoke of reliability, availability, scalability, serviceability. Now, the analysis services technology, the reporting technology. If we think about breakthrough insights, if we have employees that are going to be making decisions daily, they need all of this technology, the entire data platform, to be mission critical and available. So we've done a lot of work in that space. So we can build these technologies, we can incorporate large data. And some of the solutions, Yahoo is an example. They've got a petabyte scale data that they're processing in Hadoop that feeds a 24 terabyte mission critical OLAP solution built on analysis services. We also have a parallel data warehouse product, massively parallel, which we've tested internally, over 600 terabytes. And the whole trick here is to be able to get from that new data, the data that's available, to insight. So we talk about this as the fastest time to insight or the fastest time to solution. That's about having the tools and reducing the friction and allowing people to do it in a self-service way. But a key part of the time to solution piece itself is the time to acquire, to procure, to set up the software and the hardware itself. So part of the value of SQL Server's parallel data warehouse solution is that it is a true appliance, offering 10x performance improvement in this new release. 10x, where does that come from? What we've done is a lot of work inside the parallel data warehouse, which makes use of the core SQL Server engine for data warehousing, which has a sophisticated cost-based optimizer. And on top of that core, we've built a true cost-based global optimizer for the upcoming release of the parallel data warehouse. We've also done a lot of work in the data movement service, that high-performance, high-volume data service that moves data from one node to another in this massively scalable cluster. This is a true appliance solution. But one of the advantages we have is that we offer it pre-configured, engineered, wheel it in, plug it in, get value, not just from a single hardware vendor, but from a choice of hardware vendors. So unlike others, where it's all one thing, you have your choice of hardware vendors. We have one hardware vendor, Dell, who's now providing a half-rack appliance, and other vendors will offer half-rack coming soon. We've heard from our customers they want to be able to start small and incrementally add to their appliance. Half-rack is something that they've asked for, and that will be available now in AU3. Manageability is critical here as well. So we've done system center integration with the AU3 release to be able to manage this cluster, manage this appliance using tools that are familiar to you. And the ability to both scale up using the data warehouse capabilities of SQL Server and then scale out in a massive way using the parallel data warehouse, we've taken a lot of friction out of that in this release. What we've done is we've added collation support for international character sets. We've also added support for a class of stored procedures now in the parallel data warehouse. Again, something customers have been asking for. So in big data, we've talked a little bit about petabyte scale. Let's spend a second there talking about that. All of this new data, we see a lot of people using Hadoop, and we took a look at that. As a technical fellow, one of my roles at the company is to go around and find out what's happening outside of Microsoft. And it was quite clear a year or two ago that there was a real movement happening with Hadoop. We took a look at that and said, well, what is it and how do we deal with that? So once we understood what people were doing with it, once we understood when we talked to customers how they were using it, many of them wanted to get from that petabyte scale processing in Hadoop into analysis services, into PowerPivot, into SQL Server. We said, wow, we can really do a lot there. So we built a set of connectors to make it very easy to get data from Hadoop there. And, we're talking petabyte scale, but as we look at things, many customers simply have 4, 8, 12 node clusters, and it's terabyte scale workloads. So this speaks to the fact it's not just about the size, but it were log files. They might have other files. We're just being able to store it in HDFS, the reliable file system with Hadoop, transform it. I spoke earlier this notion of information production. So being able to do this information production and then have that result feed into analysis services, SQL Server in a data warehousing sense was really important to them. So again, I'll go back to that reference to Yahoo, who's got that petabytes of data they're dealing with that they distill into an analysis services cube that has tens of terabytes. There was an interesting blog posting back in December from the CEO of Clout, K-L-O-U-T. They're a social site on the internet, and they described that exact same scenario. Using Hadoop, using Microsoft SQL Server analysis services, And that was December of last year, so you can go out and find that reference as well. So it's this ability to take this data in this form, to produce it into information that we can feed into the analysis system to enable that self-service, get your hands into it and make meaning of the data that really collapses the time to insight, both in terms of the time and the friction. So we've done a very good job of integrating this new world of petabyte scale, this new world of big data into the SQL Server data platform. So we are working very closely with the Apache community, with Hortonworks on Hadoop. We want a great version of Hadoop running on Windows Server. We want a great version of Hadoop running as a cloud service in Azure. And we are contributing back to the community. One of the things that we've done, starting from a net new perspective, is we've built a JavaScript environment to allow JavaScript developers to develop map and reduce jobs in JavaScript in a JavaScript IDE, and then deploy them on a Hadoop on Windows or a Hadoop on Linux. And that work we plan on just contributing to the community. And so we're really seriously participating in this in a way that is a win-win for that community and a win-win for our customers and a win for us. So with that, let me just summarize, wrap up. Breakthrough insights. It's the ability to take the data, to take the information that is more available around you and transform it into something that can help you drive your business, to help make great decisions. In this session, we focused on breakthrough insights, a tremendous number of improvements in SQL Server 2012. We talked about PowerPivot and Power View. We talked about analysis services and reporting services being sort of foundational pieces. We talked about advances in integration services, data quality services, and master data services. So these insights, the ability to derive value out of data, is backed up by a relational and non-relational solutions that we talked about. The data warehousing side in SQL Server data warehousing, the X-velocity technology, the massively parallel solution in the parallel data warehouse. And we also talked about non-relational side, the big data world, if you will, and our support for Hadoop and some of the things that you can do there. We're really making it easy to take the data that's available today and turn it into insight with SQL Server 2012. And I hope that this session has helped explain some of that, and I hope it's whet your appetite for the product, because the team has been working hard to produce this, and we're really looking forward to being able to get it into your hands. Thank you.